Well, unfortunately, some of the worst of it is being shared widely on social media in Papua New Guinea. So we've seen quite a few graphic videos of tribal fighting that have come out recently, the most grotesque and recent of which involves the corpses of a few dead men that are being dragged behind a ute. And of course, it's got a lot of the nation and even internationally, there's a lot of concern about the tribal fighting that's going on in Enga in the Highlands. Of course, we've heard from police that they're very concerned by the increasing tribal fighting. They say about 60 to 70 people have died in the last few weeks. And this video has been widely condemned by politicians as well as many others in Papua New Guinea. The Prime Minister has labelled it jungle justice that's being carried out, and it's prompted widespread calls for people to lay down their arms and for many of these tribal fights to be resolved.
And Tim, can you give us a bit of background on the fighting and how it's really escalated in recent weeks even?
Well, of course, tribal fighting is nothing new in Papua New Guinea. It's got quite a long history, of course, to resolve issues, say, over land or political disputes and the like. But what we're seeing explicitly at the moment is access to much more high-powered weapons than have really ever been seen before. In fact, in some instances, they're saying that some of the tribal fights are being carried out using drones to even scope sort of territory between one tribe and another. So there's that, and there's also the development that mercenaries are being used by some tribes to wage war against another. So all of this is quite largely a new development in tribal fighting there in the Highlands, and that has, of course, concerned many people. Of course, it's prompted there to be a larger police response, and of course the government wants to, take harsher action against those involved in tribal fighting. But we're seeing that tens of thousands of people are being displaced because of this really much higher powered, much more high impact tribal fighting that's now being compared effectively to guerrilla warfare.
Can you tell us a bit more about how the police are responding and what they're doing to try to quell the violence?
Well, one of the big issues in Papua New Guinea is that there's really a mismatch between police numbers and the general population. They're thoroughly under-resourced and generally hopelessly outgunned in many of these regions. So, of course, we're hearing from police that they're dramatically trying to bolster their numbers in general. But with respect to this particular response, they're looking at sending in a force of about 100 to 200 people, specialist officers, that can hopefully try and quell the violence. We've also heard from Police Commissioner David Manning. He's issued a circular to the police force that he's authorised the use of lethal force in these instances where they do come across armed tribesmen. They've even said that even if they're armed with machetes and the like, that they're approved to use lethal force. We have heard from police, though, that they've said that they will only be using that in life-threatening circumstances. But certainly it's got police quite worried if they're authorising that use of lethal force. In fact, they're really quite concerned about how they try and quell the ongoing violence.
Well, police are concerned, but human rights groups are also worried about how the violence is being addressed.
Well, that's right. I mean, approving the use of lethal force is quite a significant step, and it's one that is worrying many in the human rights community. Of course, some are referring to, how police might use that particular power, of course, referring to people, bush knives are quite common in Papua New Guinea, and so whether people might just be carrying a bush knife for farming or the like, or their general activities, and concerns maybe that they could be shot dead and, further escalating the violence as well. So, of course, that while it is an escalation that police, want to take because they feel that it's important to protect lives and property, it's raised many eyebrows and concerns about how it's going to be used or how it could be used across Enga province.
And Tim, what action is the government taking?
We've had some action from the government. They introduced a curfew some weeks ago for about 3 months or so. Now, they say that was hopefully to give police greater ability to, search people and the like as well. But we have seen really that considerable escalation since the curfew was announced. So the government are looking at much more drastic measures. They're looking at amending the Tribal Violence Act to allow law enforcement to give life sentences to those who are in charge or that have been organising the violence. They're also looking at effectively giving police, some sort of immunity as well when dealing with these cases as well to sort of quell the violence. So they're hoping that that might create some change as well. But broadly, of course, they're labelling these acts as abhorrent, and they're hoping that groups there and police will be able to, start to resolve some of these ongoing tribal fights that have really been quite considerable since the election last year and have led to, of course, so many people displaced and quite so many lives lost.
Tim, thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne.